Hi guys, Nomis here. Welcome back to Nomishavn for episode number 45. In this episode I'll be starting to build what is the port of Nomishavn. This is a pretty big project, so I decided to divide it into several episodes, and this will be part 1. Most likely it'll be a 2-episode build, maybe more, I'll see. And for the first part in this episode I'll build out most of what is the cargo area of the port. But before I start on building the port, I need to do some work in the highways, which will feed directly into the port through this big interchange here. In earlier episodes you would have seen I built this double-decker highway to save space, and I'll be extending that through the rest of this district. And I need to make this interchange work with this double-decker highway layout. What I'm doing is mostly deleting all the connections and keeping the looping part, the main part of the interchange. I can then use most of the interchange and just connect everything. Once I've made the changes to the highway, I make ramps in all the directions and connect it up. Then use IMT to make it look right. There are some vanilla keys and path networks there, and I kinda like the layering it provides, but I do want to change them to something nicer. For the path, I upgraded it to a shared bike and pedestrian path. I imagine citizens will use this for longer bike commutes within the city, and it will probably also be popular for joggers. The key I upgrade to a nice custom walkable key with trances, and make sure it meets down at ground level to connect with the street. So before I go back into game, I want to have a little look on Google Earth on what if has been the main inspiration for this build. So this is one of the container terminals at Port of Antwerp in Belgium. And yeah, you can see here it's pretty massive, but it's this specific part here that I'll be taking some inspiration from. I'm not gonna do like a one-to-one of this. I'm just looking at different details on what I can include in my own build. So the very first thing I'm focusing on is the entrance. You can see here, it's like it's a pretty thin road which just merges out into a bunch of lanes into what is, it looks like some toll booths. I guess it's kind of like a checkpoint for the trucks. And after you go through the toll booths, you have all these lines and the chevrons, some stop decals here. And it goes through this station here. I don't know what that is, but it looks some security gates and some curbs and some exit decals, I guess, some arrows. It seems like here on the side you exit the port. So I'll do something like that. And if you look further, it goes into what you can see a lot in the whole port is this kind of, I would call it like a main road, which is marked with just like a dashed line in the middle, and through like on the edge of the port you can see it runs here with like some barriers separating it from the area where the containers would be dropped off from the cranes. And just like the general design here, you got some scattered yellow lines, which is where the crane rail will be, just to signify for people not to walk there because the crane is going back and forth. And then there's some simple white lines along it. Something else I want to take a look at is this big parking lots for, this is called straddle carriers, which is the vehicles which will pick up the different containers and put them in place under the cranes, which we can see over here. They will drive down here, as far as I understand. And yeah, we'll just have these big yards for them to be stored when they're not in use. So I'll do something like that just throughout the build. And of course I'll be doing a few of these like truck parking stops throughout the yard. The container terminal, you have these angled parkings, which is really usual for truck stops. So I'll find some spaces to do that within the build as well. So here back in game, I'm starting to build the truck entrance of the cargo terminal. For this whole part, I'm using a plain concrete network and decorating them with IMT later on. But a lot of it will just be left as blank pavement that trucks can drive on. This roundabout connects into the highway interchange, so the cargo terminal will have really great access to the highway. There's some really cool toll booth props in the workshop, which came in great to use here. And going through them, I line a bunch of one-way plain roads that I can use IMT on to design something similar to what we saw on Google Earth. This whole port area was already set up with a big network of vanilla keys on the map, and it was pretty simple to just upgrade them to this industrial key, which is much more fitting. I also adjust the corner in Node Controller to make them sharp rather than rounded, as this is a bit more realistic for a port like this. I'm lining up roads all along the keys, and here I want to make a design in IMT that I will use all along the cargo terminal, at least where the ships will be parked and you have the ship cranes. And this is inspired by what we could see in the cargo terminal in Antwerp. The crane rails, angled yellow lines and white lines, but white lines will make sure the width is enough to carry the straddle carrier between them. I'm also adding some dock curbs with IMT as they weren't included in the key network, and some concrete barriers to separate the main truck road from the container pickup lanes. The beam on the ship crane is a little bit too low for the straddle carrier to pass under, so I just made some changes in PO to pull it higher up. I don't think I saw something like this on Google Earth, but I wanted some parts of the cargo yards to have this stacking crane running along. From my understanding, it is used to more effectively stack and organize all the containers in the yard. There will only be 2 of these big cranes. I would imagine this is something they built out in recent years and might build more of throughout the port in an effort of modernization. For the ship cranes, I want to have some customization. Using the text tool in PO, I overlap the CTB sign with some blue And then I'll write port of Nomishavn. And I'll have this on all the ship cranes, which I'll copy all over. I figured out a way to decorate a little storage yard for straddle carriers using IMT. I'll put a few of these around in spots that seem fitting. Next to it I also mark out some storage yards for forklifts. For the next part I want to look at this area here, which is pretty cool. It looks like some kind of administration building, I guess. And I don't have like exactly the right assets, but I'm gonna do something inspired by this. So I'll have like an office building, and it looks like some of those mobile offices, some vans parked, some other cars parked, and of course here you have this pretty interesting parking lot. You have the curbs on the edges and the crosswalks all over and the arrows on the sides. And you have this dashed kind of like a main road going through the middle of it. And I'll just use normal parking lot decals because I don't have this exact one. So I'm just taking some inspiration for that, and yeah, we'll see in game how I'm gonna do that. And next up, I want to look a bit at the actual the container yards and specifically the markings. I don't know exactly what these markings means, but I want to try to copy them. You have some white lines on the sides on the road that crosses over and out to the sides, and at all of the intersections you have this double solid lines, and then a bit away from that you have a single solid line. It seems to be like a pretty consistent design throughout. So I'm going to do something like that with IMT probably. Just try to, I think it's a pretty cool design. So I'm going to try to do something like that. Around the container yards, I use some decals to number the different rows of containers, something you will see on pretty much all container terminals. I didn't do this for the entire container terminal, as I realized this will eat into my prop limit quite heavily, and I'm already struggling there. I might do it for all of them at a later point and convert it to PO, if the performance allows it. So now I just want to do some work on a few road and rail networks right by the port. The arterial road that runs along the port I want to turn off and head up towards the rest of the district on this island. And I'm raising up the rail network here to match the height of the terrain above. This also makes it easier for the road to pass under the rail. Lastly, I also set up a container rail yard inside the port area. It won't be functional, just for decoration to make it look like the port has some rail connections, which would make sense. I'll detail this a bit later. Over at this end of the port, near the mouth of a river, is a few dedicated barge harbors. The idea is that a lot of cargo coming into the port on bigger ships will be loaded onto barges here, and then transported through the rivers to smaller local harbors, around the city. There's a few of these around already, especially around Björgvin. My plan is to have a canal cutting through the Malmö district, which barges can use as a shortcut. But I'll get to this in another episode. Using IMT, I just started setting up some security separation with really tall fences to add to that industrial look. I wanted to have a little bit of space between the fence and the road, and why I need this will become clear later. Something else container terminals always have are these truck parkings with angled lines, and I figured out a way to put in these lines with IMT using some decals and just rotating them. And for the trucks I put down some props between the lines. And now I'm coming over to add details to the container rail yard. I'm using the same crane I used for a stacking crane on some of the container terminals. I think it has the right look of a crane which would unload container cars from trains. Along the side of the tracks, I put some crane rails and lines for the straddle carriers to run along. To add a little bit of variety, I'm using a few warehouses in a few of the larger empty spots between the container yards, and detailing around them with a few industrial props. The quay walls originally ran further up the coastline here, but I wanted to transition into something more natural looking. So I just smoothed out the terrain here and decorated it out with lots of rocks. Because this is an industrial area with lots of trucks, I want to rough up the surfaces with some tire mark decals and lots of the usual stain decals. And here I finally decorate up the truck entrance coming in from the roundabout. It's just some simple industrial gates with a security booth prop in the middle and a little sign that reads truck entrance. I'm not building anything here just yet, but this hill with the lighthouse didn't fit my plans. So I removed everything and flattened it out, so I could line it with quay walls and build something in this area for the next part of the port build. So Blue Thunder has made this awesome forklift asset, which in addition to being props also has a bus version. This means I can make short bus lines between the container yards and in that way make forklifts drive around the port for some nice movement. To spawn the forklifts I just hide a block service cube bus terminal inside a warehouse, as they also work as bus depots. Adding even more movement to the port, I use PO to have a little animation on a few of the cranes, just moving side to side. And the final touch is just adding some lights. Often I see these big tower lights on ports. This asset is really a light tower made for railways, but I think it has the right look for the port too. Anyways, that is it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it if you made it to the end. This port build is a pretty massive project, as you can probably tell, and it's not yet done. I won't have any cinematics for this video. I'll save that for the next part when I hopefully finish building the port. Here you can just see a little overview of what I built in the port so far. If you would like the video, write a comment or subscribe. It would mean a lot to me and really help you grow the channel. I also do have a Patreon, in case you'd wish to support me further. Have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you in the next part of Nomishavn, where I hopefully finish the rest of the port.